Hello, everyone, and welcome to Burn the Ship, the podcast that helps entrepreneurs go all in on their business, and we introduce them to professionals that can help them to do so. Today, we have a very special guest. Nick, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Roderick. Thanks for inviting me here, and glad to be here.
Excellent, excellent. We definitely appreciate it. Go ahead and introduce yourself and the name of your business.
Yeah, so my name is Nick Sally. My company is phraCTO, like fractional CTO with a PH. I do fractional CTO executive consulting and trying to build a managed service provider IT consulting business.
Awesome, awesome. We definitely appreciate you coming on today, and we understand that time is one of our most valuable resources. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, so I started really following my brother, who was in IT and technology all the way back in high school. Right? Mm-hmm. We cut grass and we bought ourselves a Commodore 64 in the early 90s. He went off to school, did IT, and I just said, hey, like that's cool with me. So I followed and went to school, got a degree in IT, and then followed him. He went to GW in Washington, D.C. So I moved to D.C. after I graduated and spent then 20 years doing federal IT contracting at the company that he founded, and worked all the way from the basement all the way through acquisition. And so kind of did everything. Used my degree for the most part, unlike some people, but I actually used some of the skills I learned in school.
I understand.
And then just did kind of a little bit of everything. I worked inside the business, first essentially as an intern, IT manager, and then, director of IT for the company. But I also spent a lot of time, since we were a federal IT contractor, we had lots of different contracts. I've worked for almost every branch of the military, bunch of federal agencies, doing various things. I've written code, did infrastructure, mail, Office 365. And if I have one deep skill, it's mail. So I'm the mail guy.
Nice.
But I had, all that inside and outside and customer work. I've just developed a large set of skills, mainly on IT infrastructure. And then 2019, left that company and said, I'm kind of done. I don't really want to do this federal stuff anymore. I don't really want to do consulting. So I tried to build a little side hustle business. The intent was to do something different. But at the same time, I started getting phone calls from all my friends who were on the executive team that said, hey, I need help with IT. Can you help me with my IT? So both were going on. But of course, we closed on the business January 2020. And that's the end of the story. You know what happened next?
Yes.
You know what happened next. And so
crazy there.
By January 2021, that failure was a learning process. I think we can get into some of that. But I was making way more money sitting in my PJs in my dining room doing IT consulting. So I just said, okay, this is for me. And I've been doing independent fractional CTO IT consulting for 4 or 5 years. And then last year just decided to be intentional about, all right, I need to grow a business. I want to do more. I want to kind of, the intent of the side hustle to grow a business and manage a business and have a team and hire people. That was always my intent, is to run something. So I'm like, I need to do that. So that was, and that's kind of where I'm now. I'm 6 months into here, right? All my previous network and contacts and business is all in DC, is all DC based. Half of it's federal IT contractors that I support. But I'd rather drive to my customers instead of flying them. So here in Atlanta, I'm getting to know folks. So.
Makes sense. Now, I always like to go back into that history and talk a little bit about some of those things that you did in the past that set you up for success in the future. Now, without messing with your security clearance or anything like that, I was wondering if you could share with us one of those stories where you came in on a federal contract or a contract and you had to fix something. Sounds like you were focused on the mail. Do you have a story that you could share that their mail system was all jumbled up, or they had an IT thing that was all messed up and you were able to fix it? Can you share a story of how one of those?
Yeah, I mean, it's more like project based. Not necessarily, I wouldn't necessarily think it was messed up, but it was getting them from whatever current situation they're in to a better situation. So working in that space, we actually had a commercial customer that had the same kind of requirements. and this was early clouds, so 2011, 2012ish when the word cloud started to come out, and the customer had specific requirements that they needed to get out of their own data center because they couldn't handle those requirements. But Microsoft had yet to accept commercial customers into their government's tenant. We can do that today. I'm actually in there right now.
Okay.
It's a lot easier, but we had to build them a hosted mail service on AWS that satisfied requirements, and it was all successful. We got it, and it was actually the first managed service. So in 2014 or 15, it was the first managed service our company did, and we kind of built the model. And so I look at it more as, like I said, not necessarily something that was messed up and we fixed it. There was a goal and a strategy, and we got the customer there, and it worked out, and everybody was happy.
Yeah, that's awesome. I see the way that your creativity came up with a solution for something that wasn't even there. It sounds like what not necessarily problem, but thing that could help them to be a little bit more seamless. You were able to build it. Is that something that you just acquired in your schooling, or did you learn that from the time that you started working with your brother?
Yeah, that was definitely on the job. I mean, the whole company's mantra was consultants first.
Okay.
And so we were nerds and we were techie, and we could sit in a closet and have do our work all weekend, and I'm still happy doing that because that's just my personality.
Yes.
But we learned to be consultants first, and so that's still my approach today, especially with the fractional CTO work. Is I don't sell a solution, I don't sell a package. I'm building an MSP company, but I don't sell MSP services.
Okay.
I fix your problems. So we try and figure out what's happening, what do you need, and there's no one size fits all in IT. It's kind of a cool double thing.
Yeah.
It's the reason I like IT, because there's really never only one solution. So you can be creative.
Yes.
You can figure that kind of stuff out, and then it also allows you to learn as you go. So that was the biggest thing, and that was a company culture.
Okay.
It was consultants first, requirements, needs. Ask questions. What's your risk? What's your compliance needs, and then you build a solution based on that. So that's and now having been there for 20 years, that's built into me.
Yes, makes sense. So you were with that company for 20 years. You started another venture that didn't necessarily fit the bill and the mode of what you wanted to do. So about 6 months or so, you said, "Hey, I'm gonna get out here and start my own lane." Was it a specific event that happened that made you say, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to burn the ship and go all in on my own business"? Was it a specific event that happened?
I don't think it's necessarily a specific event. It's more like you've been there for 20 years. For me, I like to get into new stuff, and when I get into it, I dive in. Like, you could ask my wife, she's crazy. Like, when you go all in, when you get into something, you're all in. I'm like, oh yeah. And so it was. And there's sort of a sentiment, I don't think it's unique to the federal space or unique to my colleagues from that company, kind of like get tired and like, I want to do something different. Now, I had a mentor on my shoulder who kept yelling at me, and he's still yelling at me, like, don't do that. And I was like, I just want to do something different. I want to try. And of course, I want to try something on my own, right?
Yes.
I was an employee, corporate the whole time. The company was awesome, great culture, but still, I wanted to do something by myself. So I think it was more like a slow burn that was said, hey, I want to do that. You should do something about that. Even in 2015, and this is 2015, I started a blog,
Okay.
A huge passion of mine is mentoring. It's not like a mantra. It's not some vision of my company. I did it. I started our internship programs at that company. I mentored folks in college, George Mason University, brought them out, hired them as interns. We hired them as full-time employees, and they've been successful to this day. So that was always important, but I moved here to Atlanta in 2015, and I lost that. Mentoring is very personal. You have to be next to somebody.
Makes sense.
And I was like, how do I do that? Well, it's, the web, the internet, the social media. I was like, so I started a blog like everybody else in 2015. And that was sort of like, that was kind of the beginning of the slow burn. I was like, let me try this. Registered in LLC. I'm a company now, So it was like, it just took a little time. And for me, who was not that natural, like hungry, out of college entrepreneur, didn't have that background, it took a while to build that. There wasn't like a single moment where it was like, bam, I'm into this. But when I left the company at the end of that, after acquisition, it was like, now's the time. There's no such thing as perfect timing.
Yeah.
But if there is, Now's the time.
That
so
was
let's try something.
Awesome. Now we've transitioned into your new business. Now, share with us about those services, the products that you're offering. Tell us about the business so we can understand what you do.
Yeah, so, coming out of DC and just that's where my professional network is, I can service, federal contractors. I have not yet, although we briefly talked about, and I'll get into that, about becoming a federal contractor. But to date, all of my customers are small to mid-sized companies, usually have some kind of IT footprint, not necessarily a startup. And that's actually a quick segue. If you Google fractional CTO, you'll come up with Silicon Valley software-based architects. I don't do that.
I got you.
I used I could have done CIO or CTO. I chose the T because it was technical, and that my intent there was that it was the back-end infrastructure. So those customers, mid-sized, small, that have some sort of IT presence, you've got a network, you've got some gear, you've got a closet with some servers in it, a bunch of desktops that need supporting. And then especially, segued off the mentorship, I like working with a team.
Yes.
I've found a lot of my customers have small teams, they're young. Sometimes the companies say kids. I hate using the word kids. These are full-grown adults with degrees that are professionals and trying, but they need a little help. And my customers are the owners or the CEOs of the company, and that's who I want to interface with. But I want to help the team, so help them grow. And I like having people there because I like working with people, and I like working with the IT team. I besides the federal business, I tend to not get into any other regulated industries like financial or medical. I understand the federal compliance side, and I don't need to add another one to my stack.
Right.
And there's lots of other great folks out there that specialize, like in legal IT support. So I stay away from that. But yes, small to medium, have some sort of presence, and then the owner and executive typically is someone who is an expert in their field. They started the business because they knew how to deliver that product or service. They're good business owners. They're great leaders. They understand their business. But IT's this black box. They have no idea.
Right.
And I can give you examples of that. Just customers calling and saying, like, I got all this other stuff. Man, I don't know. I don't even know where to start. Okay. And so that's where I come in, and I can help them navigate requirements-based, understanding the business, not coming with a solution to sell, but understanding it and then providing them the answers that they're looking for.
Would it be safe to say that when someone brings you on, you are helping them with putting their systems in place, like whatever that needs to be when it comes to their IT services? So when they come to you, they just got a bunch of spaghetti noodles, and then you just try to put it where it is, some sort of process. Would that be a correct assumption?
Yeah, and a lot of times I think people focus on that tech, right? So many times I get questions. Do you know VPNs, right? Do you know firewalls? Yes, I do, but that's not where I start. Like, why do you think you need a firewall? Why are you using a VPN? Okay. Right. A lot of times some of that stuff ends up falling back into maybe a previous MSP or even just their cybersecurity insurance rider. Like, it literally says, are you using a firewall? Well, they say, okay, I need a firewall. So they use a firewall, but there's all kinds of different firewalls, and there's also different reasons to use them, and there's other requirements wrapped around those technicals. I hate, right? And I just saw you're drifting off there as I'm talking about some technical stuff.
Yes, I was like,
right. So I try not to get even that layer deep. It's just, what are you trying to accomplish? What are your compliance requirements that are in your industry? What's your risk profile? Like I have customers that are very, very acceptable to risk. Okay. And then I've got some that are super risk averse, like make 6 backups, store them in 4 different places, like back it up 4 times. Like, so that I can't propose a solution, the one that fits you, if I don't know what that profile is. And so try to figure all that out first, and then leave the answer to me, and I can translate it with my experience, and I can give you the right VPN if that's what you needed.
Yes, makes sense. Now, you mentioned earlier you didn't necessarily want to have to fly to the clients anymore. So geographically, I know we're here in that greater Atlanta area. Are you focused on businesses hyper local, or does it matter where your opportunities come from?
Yeah, look, I started doing the independent consulting in the summer of 2019, and my number one sales issue, and at least the top three and first questions were, hey, you're remote. How's this going to work? 6 months later, not even no one's even asking that question anymore.
Okay.
So I can serve nationally. I always like to go to my customers. So if a lead popped up tomorrow and it was qualified, we had some good Zoom meetings or something, I'd say, hey, let me fly up to Seattle and let's meet.
Okay.
And that usually is enough to build some trust. And I'm kind of old school like that. I would prefer the flesh and the presence. That I think that goes a long way, especially back to the mentoring. That helps develop it. So I can service anybody. I just did a mail migration for someone in Phoenix this weekend.
Okay.
So it wasn't you
Not
can
a
do
problem.
these things, but the MSP side and building that side, I think it does require presence. It requires that you have techs that visit your customers. And so that's where I'd rather have it locally. I want to build that team. Part of my vision is that mentorship, and I'm going to build people locally. I want to mentor these people that I'm hiring, and I want them to grow with the business and service customers that are local to us. So I think it's more of intent than necessity.
Okay. Makes sense, because, for me, I want to try to find out who that ideal person is. That way, if an entrepreneur is watching and they're local and they see that can fit that mold, or even it's the next section, referral partners. If a referral partner hears about you and they say, okay, I heard Nick talk about that particular problem, let me put him in front of them. And as we talk about referral partners, that's how we met, through networking and opportunities for other industries to send us business. Have you found over time a great referral partner for you that you would like to get introduced to?
Yeah, so the networking in general, I definitely advise that. Having gotten intentional about growing a business about 8 months ago, I joined some networking groups, and I think people's concept, I can spend an hour talking about what I've learned in networking, but I think some people misunderstand the intent. And while the intent is certainly to generate leads, and of course I want a sale, a huge part of the value I've found is the network and meeting people. And like yourself, I would have never met you and I would have never seen the office and your business and understood how other people operate if I hadn't have done that. And so I think that's a great way to start understanding the landscape of who you need to target. Direct leads have come out of some of the direct groups. So same thing. There are people in the groups, when you message and you say something, it's taken me 6 months to refine my message. The first 3 months, everybody looked like you about 5 minutes ago, and you're like, what are you talking about? So I try to figure out how to learn. That was the whole black box thing. Try to figure out a quick, easy way to say something that people understand you. And that took a while to develop. So that was valuable. And then I would say, direct referral partners, anybody that's sitting with owners or sitting in the C-suite, engaged with decision makers, that hears pain points.
Okay.
And they're simple. Projector won't work. My laptop keeps rebooting, right? These simple things. And then I think that it segues into, I can't ever fix this out. My team always seems busy. You'll hear any kind of a grumbling about the IT stack, whether it's a website or email or in-house or network or connectivity. Any of that stuff is a great referral for those people that are sitting there and hear it, because they're sitting with, and of course, key stakeholders and decision makers are the people that I need access to.
Absolutely.
And an important part about my engagements are working directly with the owner or the CEO, because it only works that way. If I work underneath, I don't mind it, because I get to work with folks and sort of mentor them. But I don't have any authority to kind of get stuff done. And so that's important as well, that I engaged with leadership to get decisions implemented, and direct access to the budget, right? So that I don't have to go through a process.
Yeah, it makes sense because if you're able to talk with the top, they can help you to share your message down.
Right.
It's one of those things where it's hard to manage up sometimes. For myself, I've been in business and businesses for a long time, and it's much easier when the message is flowing down than when I'm trying to manage up to the people, because there's so many layers to try to get through. So that is very important to get you in contact with that actual decision maker. Now, as far as for yourself, you went to school, you're in a very technical industry, probably forgot more stuff this morning than I know about the whole IT world. But I am confident that there are some business skills that you have acquired and nurtured over that span of business that have helped you to be successful. Do you mind sharing with the entrepreneurs and business owners that are watching today some of those best practices or business skills that have helped you?
Yeah, I think the easiest one is the name of the podcast, right? Mm-hmm. That's sort of burning the ship. But my perspective is the mistakes. So if I go back to that business that I bought in 2020, you could look at that and say, man, it was an investment. I spent money buying that.
Yeah.
And then closed it a year later. And I would just say, if I had to go get an MBA, I would have paid more, and it would have taken me longer to learn all the lessons I learned in a year.
Okay.
And I'm an eternal optimist. I will always be optimistic about any situation.
Right.
And you hear this all the time, right? You have to fail to move forward, and failures are learning, and that's my perspective. And so, there's a lot of lessons. The consultants first, right? That's built into my kind of ethos. But yeah, like that one was a big one because the intent, and I learned, and of course I felt, kind of sad. Oh man, I thought this was going to work out. I wanted to try. But when it was over, it was over.
Right.
And I pivoted and moved forward and just said, hey, look, what did I learn? And so I have a kind of a stack of knowledge out of that I can apply. So if I had just started this business 6 months ago, there would be a ton of questions in my head about how do I do this? How do I do that? What about, simple back-end office things, payroll, HR, all these things that you need to run a business that people don't think about, who are like, I want to be in the business of doing IT and servicing my customers. Well, if you're the owner, you got to do sales, and you have to run the business, and then you have to deliver the services. I don't have any anxiety about those back-end services because I've already gone through it.
Yes.
So I don't have to approach it or figure it out. I know exactly where I need to go now.
Yeah, it seems like not being afraid to get out there, and when you do get out there, see it as a learning experience. I share that with my reps all the time. I said, try to have as many conversations as you can, because although you may not be able to take nothing but about 15% of that conversation, it is something that you learned. And because you weren't afraid to get out there and start your own business, look how much knowledge you have for your next situation. So to the people that are watching, don't be afraid to get out there and give it a try and see how it goes.
Conversations are awesome.
Yeah. Now, you have talked a lot about, IT. Again, I already knew you were a specialist in it before you came in here because of our previous talks, but this just enlightened me more. And I want to kind of pivot away from the business and the technical talk, because we want people to understand the reason why we do all these things is to live this thing we call a life. So let's just say that people are protected, their mail is all squared away, and all the solutions are in place. Time and money is not an issue. What is it that Nick would do with his time?
Yeah, family first. My wife, I have 2 kids, 2 teenagers, so that would be all in on the family. And time and money are an issue. That's where I would spend it.
Okay,
certainly. But like I'd said previously, I have hobbies that they come and go, and when I get into them, I get into them. Yeah. I could list. We can have another podcast.
Yeah, so tell us a couple of them.
I like to. I'm a foodie, so I like food. That was actually one of the questions. I think if you didn't do this, what would you do? I was going to be a chef. I was going to go to culinary school because I worked in a restaurant as a teenager, and I've always loved food, and we still love food. But got into wine, and then I realized it's really hard to taste and sample wine by yourself. Even just with a spouse, a full bottle of wine is kind of a lot. We tried, and we had some friends, but I wasn't going fast enough for me.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, what else is out there? Scotch. So I got into Scotch collecting. My buddy had a holiday party. I was having a Scotch party. We've eventually combined them. So for about 5 years, we had these Scotch holiday party.
Okay.
At one point, I had, I think, 85 single malts in my collection where people would bring them to the party. And so just go all in, reading, knowing all about them, and just kind of diving into that. And then, I've gotten into audio. So audiophile, I've got, home audio systems at home, and just getting into that. As a tech guy, I like to kind of fiddle with the settings and and then I'll go read and buy books and kind of try to understand what does settings actually mean, and what effect the room has on this. And so just going all in on that. And then I always like to tell people, the question always comes up in networking, like, tell us something about yourself that no one knows. I played professional roller hockey. So I'm a lifelong roller hockey person. Passion, probably one of the few non-fleeting hobbies I've had. So I played growing up on the street in Pittsburgh. I started the college club team. I started the Eastern Collegiate Roller Hockey Association.
Oh my goodness.
Then we all formed up nationally and formed the Collegiate Roller Hockey League nationally. I graduated and I played at a little local rink. The guy that owned the local rink owned Major League Roller Hockey, which was the only professional roller hockey organization in the country in 2000, 2002. And I played 2 seasons of professional roller hockey.
What?
Then met my wife, got married, had kids, focused on a career, moved to Atlanta in 2015 next to probably the nicest roller hockey rink I've ever seen. I played all up and down the East Coast and Midwest. And so I stopped last year because I wanted to focus on the business, but I was the director of youth hockey there for 6 or 7 years, and I still coach and I still play, and I have a game. Coach tonight and have a game on Thursday. So
that is magnificent, man. You would never know. If you don't ask the questions, you'll never find out. Now, there are a couple questions based off of that segment that I'm going to ask. So, all right. So you're a chef. You're going to have an event with friends and family. What is going to be that dish that you make for us?
It's a big pile of meat. Any way you want to look at it. So, Thanksgiving, it's a big turkey. Easter, I just smoked a ham. I got the Traeger. So I had an offset smoker years ago. It just takes a lot of time and energy. Bought a Traeger. Highly recommend the Traeger. It's just kind of sort of set it, forget it. And now I smoke a lot of meat. So I love doing a brisket. Being from Pittsburgh, I've got... Hockey's transient. Everybody that plays hockey here in Atlanta is usually from the north, so I've got some Pittsburgh friends, so we get together to watch Penguins and Steeler games, smoke a brisket, hang out. The hockey league, the youth hockey league, we have these opening days where new families come in. I'll smoke like 4 or 5 pork butts and we'll serve. So it's these days usually revolves around the Traeger, but no matter what, it's some big pile of meat, turkey, chickens, brisket. Do a whole prime rib.
Okay. That's awesome. And when it gets to the Scotch, now, you said you had 85 different kinds. I know it may be challenging, but is there 1 or 2 that stand out above the rest? And if I have a rep that makes a big deal, it's a time for a celebration, which Scotch would you recommend that I purchase for that event?
So the all-time leader in all the parties we had was Balvenie 21-year-old Portwood. That goes all the way back to the bottle that I bought for my buddy when he got married. And at the time, I think it was $80. It might have been 65. I think if you try to buy that bottle now, it might be $400 or $500 just because the price has gone up and everybody realized it was good. Because a lot of people don't want to spend that much money on something they drink fairly quickly, the Balvenie Caribbean cask, which is a rum finish, I think it's a 14-year-old, that was a very close second. So the benefit of having a table full, like I said, you can only try like 1 or 2 bottles of wine. You open them, you don't really want to put the cork back in, but put the cork back in a Scotch bottle. So we would just sit there and go around the table and, we just sample it. Everybody tastes it. What do you think? What do you think? But Balvenie 21-year-old Portwood, Balvenie 14 Caribbean cask was a close second. Everybody said, man, this tastes just about as good. And that bottle today, I think, is still under $100. And those were the 2 best. I did a quick segue into bourbons. Don't love the whiskey and bourbon, but I realized that rye is sort of right between Scotch and whiskey. And the Angel's Envy rye finished in port, which is their standard bottle. I think was we had that with the Scotch because I'd add a couple of bourbons because people, hey, what's the difference between bourbon and
Yeah.
whiskey and Scotch? So I'd always
Yeah.
have sort of a variety,
Mm-hmm.
and we had the Angel's Envy, and everybody liked that one just as much. And
Okay.
that's another recommendation.
Yeah, I have a buddy. He loves Scotch as well, and I just wanted to be prepared when that day came. Something special happened. I know what kind to get. I gotta make sure to tuck back a couple dollars since it's $400 or $500.
I still have friends that text me and say, "Hey, I need to buy a bottle for a friend. Can I call you real quick?"
Yeah,
So
yeah.
call me anytime.
I got you.
I'll give you some recommendations.
I got you. I definitely appreciate that. And thank you so much for sharing because, again, we do all the things that we do so we can live this life. We understand we have responsibilities we have to take care of, but we want to do some things that are fun. And I truly appreciate you sharing that with us. Now, if someone has questions when it comes to IT, the fractional CTO services, the MSP business, what is the best way for them to get in contact with you?
Yeah, so I'm on most of the platforms. Obviously, the website, just www.phraCTO.com, PHRACTO.com. I'm on LinkedIn under my name, so Nick Sally. I think it's just /Nick Sally. The company's page is there as well. And then on my website, you can reach out there. Yeah.
Okay. Well, cool. Well, again, we definitely appreciate you coming on and sharing. We know that it's not always easy to talk about those different things when it comes to work. Of course, we do that every day. We're professionals at that, subject matter experts. But then about your whiskeys, your scotch and your food, and then the hockey. That's amazing, by the way. It's not always easy to share, so we always honor our guests by giving them the last word. So please look over there at your camera and tell the people something good.
Yeah, I just, on the theme of the podcast and some of the things that I've talked about, and just, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Learn, seek guidance and mentorship. There's a lot of people out there that want to help, and being acceptable to that help, understanding mistakes and failure are part of the learning process, and look forward. Burn the ship. Don't look back. Look forward. Make those decisions and dive all in.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. We truly do appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome.
Great to be here.
And to everyone that is watching, be kind and thanks.